Hey guys, here are 5 things I found interesting this week from the world of evolution and public health. Number 1. Mpox, the disease formerly known as monkeypox, is exploding in Africa, with cases from a concerning clade popping up in Europe and Asia this week, leading the WHO to declare a public health emergency of international concern. Mpox is caused by a virus that has been endemic in Central and Western Africa since at least the 1970s, with occasional jumps from animals to humans. I've been lucky enough to travel to the region to study primates, and although monkeys can be infected with what used to be called monkeypox, the main reservoir where the virus circulates is likely African rodents. Back in 2022, Mpox mutated and started spreading worldwide, mostly among men who have sex with men. Fortunately, vaccine efforts helped slow the spread. Unfortunately, this latest Mpox outbreak is caused by a different clade of the virus, a new variant of the so-called clade 1, which unfortunately has a higher fatality rate. There have already been about 600 reported deaths, most of them kids. We also just learned that clade 1 Mpox has made it into Europe and Asia. At the time of this recording, there are confirmed clade 1b cases in Sweden and Thailand, and probably more countries by the time you see this. Number 2. Last Tuesday was World Mosquito Day, and Anthony Fauci celebrated by being hospitalized for West Nile virus. I just checked and he's thankfully doing well, recuperating at home. Otherwise that kind of be a tasteless comment. West Nile virus is spread by mosquitoes and it generally causes no symptoms. However, in about 20% of cases, you can get a bad fever and flu-like symptoms, like Dr. Fauci did. Older people are most at risk for the serious forms, like when it infects the central nervous system and can cause death. West Nile virus is the leading cause of mosquito-borne disease in the US. It's caused by these obnoxious little mosquitoes called culex. To me, West Nile is a bird disease and culex mosquitoes are bird mosquitoes. The virus amplifies in birds, probably pigeons here in New York City. And then a culex mosquito bites the bird and then a person, transferring the disease between species. West Nile is no joke. There have been 142 neuroinvasive disease cases so far this year. Especially if you're older, you'd be smart to avoid getting bitten. You can check out the longer video I made about a scarier mosquito-borne disease that's in the news lately if you're interested. Number 3. From the world of celebrity botanical news, clueless actress Alicia Silverstone went viral this week after posting a TikTok of her eating a fruit off a stranger's garden plant that turned out to be poisonous.
I just bit into it because I was on the street and we were discussing whether this was a tomato or not.
You shouldn't eat plants if you don't know what they are, obviously. And Alicia Silverstone got lucky that the plant, Jerusalem cherry, had berries that are only mildly toxic. This didn't stop people on Twitter from speculating that because the plant is part of the nightshade family, the Batgirl actress was as good as dead. But tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, and their fruit is not toxic, obviously. Funnily enough, some Europeans suspected tomatoes were poisonous for 2 centuries, in part because the leaves of the tomato plant looked like its cousin, belladonna, aka deadly nightshade, one of the most poisonous plants known. Fortunately, Alicia Silverstone stole fruit from one of the less toxic members of the nightshade family. In hindsight, this story wasn't very evolution or public health focused at all, but it stuck in my head, so I had to talk about it. Number 4. I'm not a real doctor, so I try to avoid giving medical advice, but I make one exception to be an evangelist for the Mediterranean diet. If you're not in the know, the Mediterranean diet is based on how people around the Mediterranean Sea traditionally ate. Primarily plant-based with lots of fruit and veg, whole grains, some dairy, not much red meat or processed junk food, and fish like these sardines. The diet's also rich in unsaturated fats that come from plants like nuts or olive oil. Switching to the Mediterranean diet is one of the best things you can do to reduce your odds of dying, which is why I've been trying to adopt it lately and practice what I preach. And now researchers have reviewed the literature and found decent evidence that the Mediterranean diet may actually reduce COVID-19 risk. Now, diet in actual people is super hard to study, in part because people suck at remembering what they ate, but this finding is still a bit more reason to try and eat more like a turn-of-the-century Sardinian fisherman. Number 5. What exactly is the point of old women? Vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance has gotten plenty of attention for weird things he's said.
Diet Mountain Dew.
And Twitter gave him grief this week for agreeing with statements by a podcast host that grandmothers helping to raise children is, quote, the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female. As a future postmenopausal female, obviously their purpose is to contribute to society, to pursue their own personal fulfillment, etc. Ignoring these things is why people were pissed off at the podcaster, but let's also ignore them ourselves and focus a bit on the biology. The podcaster was probably alluding to the so-called grandmother hypothesis that postmenopausal women exist because they contribute to the survival of their genes by helping raise their grandchildren. My mom helps me keep my baby alive, and in doing so ensures her genes are passed on to the next generation. Most other species just die after their baby-making days are done. Good evidence for menopause only exists in a handful of species, including us and killer whales. You would think that elephants might be good candidates. They have long lives, and the matriarchs have critical wisdom, like people and whales. But female elephants don't go through menopause. They instead just make babies until they die. It's better for them to make more children who have half their genes brains than help out their grandkids who only have a quarter. This shows how complicated the evolutionary calculus is, and it's too hard to explain fully in a short video or in a weird podcast by two people who know nothing about evolution. The arrival of the tiny person that owns this onesie is the reason why I'm trying this new format, short videos with a quick summary of a couple stories from the week. I'm still looking forward to getting back to doing longer videos, but for now I think this will be fun. Please subscribe if you want to hear the latest updates from the worlds of evolutionary biology and public health.